Welcome back to Eyes on Earth, bringing you the latest news from around the world. On September 18, 2025, the Supreme Court issued a historic ruling that will reshape the landscape of American trade for years to come. In a decision that reverberated across the nation and the world, the court declared that the president can no longer unilaterally impose sweeping tariffs on imports or exports without first obtaining explicit approval from Congress. This landmark judgment marks a dramatic shift in how the United States manages its economic relationships with other countries, and it signals a new era of checks and balances in trade policy. For years, presidents from both parties have wielded broad authority to levy tariffs, often citing national security or economic emergencies. This ruling brings an end to that era of executive-led trade wars, restoring a crucial constitutional power to Congress, the branch originally tasked with regulating commerce. Lawmakers now have a renewed responsibility to debate, negotiate, and decide the terms of America's trade relationships, ensuring that such decisions reflect the will of the people and the interests of the nation as a whole. The court's decision reasserts the delicate constitutional balance of power between the executive and legislative branches. Its impact will be felt by millions of Americans, consumers, business owners, and workers alike, who have experienced the ripple effects of unpredictable trade policies. By returning this authority to Congress, the court aims to foster greater transparency, accountability, and stability in the nation's economic affairs. For everyday consumers, this could mean relief from the higher prices that tariffs often bring. With Congress now at the helm, there's hope for more predictable pricing on goods ranging from groceries to electronics, as lawmakers weigh the broader impact of trade decisions on American households. For businesses, especially manufacturers and exporters, the ruling offers a new sense of stability and predictability. No longer will companies be forced to react overnight to sudden policy shifts or unexpected tariffs. Instead, they can plan for the future, invest in growth, and compete on a more level playing field. The judgment also dismantles a key pillar of the America First agenda, which relied heavily on aggressive, unilateral trade actions. Now the White House must work in partnership with Congress, prompting a complete rethink of how the U.S. engages with global markets and its trading partners. The justices have sent a clear and unmistakable message. The power to tax and regulate commerce is a fundamental responsibility of Congress, not the executive branch. This decision reaffirms the core principles of American democracy and the separation of powers. Now, all eyes turn to Capitol Hill, where lawmakers face the challenge of reclaiming their constitutional role. The future of American trade will be shaped not by a single leader, but by the collective voice of the people's representatives, ushering in a new chapter for the nation's economy and its place in the world. For much of the 20th century, Congress held the reins on trade policy, carefully crafting tariff laws and overseeing international commerce. But as the global economy grew more complex, lawmakers began to see advantages in delegating some of this authority to the president, hoping to make the process more efficient and responsive to fast-changing world events. Over time, Congress gradually handed trade authority to the president, seeking both efficiency and flexibility in a rapidly shifting economic landscape. Key laws like the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 and the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, gave presidents broad powers to negotiate deals and respond to economic threats. These laws were designed to help the executive branch act swiftly in the nation's interest, but they also created loopholes that allowed presidents to impose tariffs or sanctions with little oversight, sometimes sidestepping the checks and balances intended by the Constitution. This concentration of power reached its height under the Trump administration, when tariffs were imposed on both allies and rivals, often bypassing Congress entirely. The president's ability to act unilaterally on trade policy sparked controversy and debate, raising questions about the proper balance of power between the branches of government. Now, the Supreme Court's recent decision has upended this model. The court ruled that future presidents must seek congressional approval for major tariffs, restoring a crucial check on executive authority and reasserting the legislative branch's role in shaping trade policy. As a result, trade policy will shift from the closed-door deliberations of the West Wing to the open forum of Congress. Lawmakers will be required to debate, negotiate, and build coalitions before any sweeping tariff measures can be enacted, making the process more inclusive and representative of diverse interests. For lobbyists and industries, this means a new focus on persuading lawmakers, rather than just appealing to the executive branch. The legislative process will demand broader consensus, and industries will need to make their case in public hearings and committee meetings. While the process may become slower, it will also be more transparent and accountable. The public will have greater visibility into how trade decisions are made, and lawmakers will be held responsible for the economic choices that affect millions of Americans. Ultimately, this marks a return to the constitutional system of checks and balances, ensuring that major economic decisions face rigorous legislative scrutiny and reflect the will of the people. The legal battle over tariffs was a classic struggle between Congress's constitutional authority and presidential power. At the heart of the dispute was a fundamental question: who truly controls the nation's economic destiny? This conflict has deep roots in American history, reflecting the ongoing tension between the legislative and executive branches over who gets to make the big decisions about money, trade, and the direction of the country. The Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate commerce and impose duties, a core legislative function. Article 1, Section 8, makes it clear that the power of the purse belongs to Congress. This authority was designed by the founders to ensure that no single person or branch could unilaterally control the nation's finances or trade policies. By placing this responsibility in the hands of elected representatives, the Constitution aimed to keep the process transparent and accountable to the people. Over time, presidents claimed more control, citing the need for swift action in foreign affairs. They argued that the modern world required quick decisions, especially when it came to international trade and national security. This led to a gradual expansion of executive power, as presidents sought to act decisively in moments of crisis or opportunity, sometimes stretching the limits of their constitutional authority. Congress passed laws delegating some trade authority, blurring the lines of power. These laws often gave the president flexibility to respond to changing global conditions, but they also raised concerns about whether Congress was giving away too much of its own responsibility. The balance between efficiency and oversight became a central issue, as lawmakers debated how much trust to place in the executive branch. The Supreme Court faced a key question: had Congress given away too much of its essential duty? The justices had to consider whether these broad delegations of power undermined the careful system of checks and balances that the Constitution established. Their decision would have lasting consequences for how the branches of government interact. The court ruled that while some delegation is allowed, Congress cannot hand over its core powers, especially the power to tax. The justices emphasized that the power to raise and spend money is fundamental to representative government. If Congress were to give up this authority, it would weaken the very foundation of democracy and the principle of government by the people. The president cannot use vague emergency laws to create nationwide tariffs. The court made it clear that executive action must be grounded in clear, specific authority granted by Congress, not in open-ended or ambiguous statutes. This decision set important limits on how far the president can go when acting alone. If Congress wants to grant such power, it must do so with clear, specific language. Lawmakers must carefully define the scope and limits of any authority they delegate, ensuring that the executive branch cannot overstep its bounds. This protects the separation of powers and keeps government accountable. The ruling restores the constitutional balance and reaffirms Congress's central role in trade policy. By upholding these principles, the court ensures that the power of the purse remains where the Constitution intended, in the hands of the people's representatives, safeguarding democracy for future generations. The Supreme Court's decision is rooted in the major questions doctrine, which limits executive power on significant issues. The court found that imposing tariffs on billions in imports is too consequential for vague statutory language. The IEPA never mentions tariffs or duties. Congress never intended to grant that power to the president. The justices applied a textualist approach, focusing on the law's plain meaning. This ruling echoes the court's recent stance against agency overreach in major policy areas. The message is clear. Transformative policies require explicit congressional authorization. The decision curbs the administrative state and reinforces Congress's primacy in lawmaking. Major economic shifts must be debated and enacted through the legislative process. The end of unilateral presidential tariffs will have immediate effects for Americans. Consumers may see lower prices on imported goods, easing household budgets. Businesses gain stability, able to plan without fear of sudden tariff hikes. The agricultural sector could regain lost export markets as retaliatory tariffs are lifted. However, domestic industries like steel and aluminum, once protected by tariffs, now face renewed global competition. Some regions may experience job losses and economic adjustment. The debate between free trade and protectionism will intensify in Congress. The ruling forces a national conversation on who benefits and who bears the cost of trade policy. The Supreme Court's ruling shifts the trade policy battle to Congress, creating new winners and losers. Industries reliant on imports, retail, tech, and auto, stand to benefit from lower costs and greater certainty. Domestic manufacturers, especially steel and aluminum, lose their tariff shield and face tougher competition. These industries will now lobby Congress for new protections, citing jobs and national security. The free trade lobby will push back, advocating for open markets and lower consumer prices. Lawmakers must navigate these competing interests in a highly public, politicized process. Trade policy will be forged through hearings, debate, and compromise, not executive orders. Congress now bears full responsibility for picking economic winners and losers. America's allies have welcomed the Supreme Court's decision as a return to predictability and law-based trade. Years of sudden tariffs strained alliances and disrupted global commerce. The ruling reassures partners that U.S. trade policy will be more stable and transparent. Strategic competitors like China see opportunity, but also uncertainty as Congress takes the reins. The shift introduces new political dynamics, but strengthens America's credibility in global trade negotiations. The world is watching to see if Congress can deliver a fair, effective trade strategy. The Supreme Court's decision marks a new era for American democracy and global trade. By returning tariff power to Congress, the court ensures major economic policies are shaped by public debate and legislative compromise. Voters gain transparency and accountability, able to hold representatives responsible for trade decisions. Congress must now craft a coherent, forward-looking trade strategy amid competing interests and political pressures. The president's role shifts to persuasion and collaboration, not unilateral action. This new balance could rebuild international trust and strengthen the global trading system. The ruling reaffirms the resilience of American institutions and the enduring power of checks and balances. A new era of American trade begins, defined by deliberation, democracy, and the rule of law.